Good morning. I wanted to go through what our current routine is with the feeding. Absolutely open-minded to new ideas, changing up methods, etc. But thought it would be helpful to have kind of a baseline of like, here's where we're at so far. This is the bucks shelter, and that's the does. The back here is where, I said the bucks shelter. The back here is where the ducks are. The dog food can't be out when the birds are let loose because we don't want chickens to eating chicken meal and rice. So in the morning, and you can see I have some cleanup to do. In the morning, first thing I wake up right now around 5, I'm trying to work that back to 4 a.m. and I give Ella a bottle. We have one bottle fed baby. We give her her bottle and then set up the kids. There she is. She sees me and she assumes that she's going to get fed. So this is Ella. She will let you know that she is Ella. Ella looks quite a bit like one of our other kids whose name is Champagne, but they're very different about how they approach you. In the barn here on the right hand side we have what we call the nursery. Definitely needs to be bigger this coming year. We've let the spiders overgrow a bit because they help keep the flies down in the barn, but the spider webs are starting to creep me out. At any rate, this area here, we refill their hay, we refill their water. We bring in 2 buckets. There's a hanging feeder that goes over, it looks like that, but it's red, and it goes over the clips here. That area being smaller, it makes it easier for the littlest kids to get back there. And then we have a larger pail that we set down here. We have a small scoop that holds about a cup. So we give the little ones a half cup and the big kids 3/4 of a pound together. But we get everything set up in there first before we bring them in and do the separation. Once we've separated them, we usually dump a bit of grain so that it's ready for the birds. We have a container there and a container there. That way they're less likely to fight. The guinea is pretty mean. And then I put down Tigger and Boots' food. Then I mix the bucks grain. I grab their hay. And sorry, I don't know if I said it already. As I fill up the doeling's bucket, I also top off the doe's water at that point and get them hay. I come down here to the bucks and I get them fed. That is an interesting system that I'd actually very much like to tweak. We currently have 2 feeder pens. I love the feeder pens, and I would love to have a feeder pen per buck. But not every buck is staying this fall. Ideally, at the end of the season, we'll be down to 3 bucks. Maybe 4, possibly. So it's always a good idea to have a few additional pens, though, because the bucklings, come next spring, they'll be separated from their dams by 8 weeks, unless they're in buck aprons. But at any rate, right now that's Elliot on the right and Paycheck goes on the left. We put the ones who have a significantly different amount of grain right now. They're the ones who go into the feeder pens. The rest of them all get a very similar ration, so if we have any issues with them, they only stole a bite or 2. So we go ahead and we set Elliot's grain in and we set Paycheck's grain in, and then we get 3 buckets down there set out for the bucklings, and we get 2 buckets here set out for Ollie and Gimli. That is Ollie right there. And then we have the hose. They are locked in at night, so they're locked in for this whole process. We have the hose set on jet and we set it between there. We set the flakes of hay they're going to need right there at that corner so that it's ready. And then as soon as we open this up so that Elliot and Paycheck know exactly where they go, So we open that up, and then we open the gate to the bucks, and they come charging out. I do have to keep an eye on Ollie and Gimli over here because they'll run to steal the bucklings' feed instead. So usually a blast of the jet from the, we have it set on jet on the hose, usually gets them to just go where they belong. And then I immediately put the hay in the feeder. Sorry, I put Albrecht's grain down first. He is in the barn himself. And then I get the hay in the feeder rapidly, come back out because Ollie and Gimli eat in record time. And that way I'm finished and I close the door to keep Ollie and Gimli from coming up to try and steal Albrecht's food. He's the one who gets the most grain at this time. The grain amount tends to change. He seems to be in kind of his finishing growth and really filling out into himself, and so he's had a higher ration to keep his body conditions score. His bucket just goes right there in those rails. And that is all for a while. I then collect the buckets and take them. The bucklings don't usually finish theirs. Elliot frequently leaves some, and Albrecht frequently leaves some. They're both on a higher ration just because they were getting kind of ribby as they were going through major growth spurts. But they're not as into that much grain. Honestly, they're more likely to go over and grab the hay. So at any rate, any remaining grain I dump back into the bins that are in the barn. And then Boots and Tigger's food needs to be picked up. So I do like to make sure there's, 10 minutes between, at least, when I set Boots and Tigger's food down and when I open the door, because there are 4 or 5 birds in the buck's pen. And when they come running out, they will go straight for the chicken meal and rice. So, then once Boots and Tigger's food is up, we let the remaining birds out. So the ducks and the chickens in the main coop over here. And at that point, it's usually only been a half hour or so, maybe 45 minutes max, since I separated the kids from the does. And for that reason, that is I'm probably wrapping that stuff up. I'm trying to think about how I would say I'm wrapping that stuff up between 6 and 6:30, 7 if we're running late. And so at that point, I come back into the house. We kind of sit and chill, I don't necessarily go back into the house. Sometimes I work on the compost pile. Sometimes I mow. Sometimes I work on some of the fence posts. But I do something else so that our goal is with the does that there's about 3 hours of separation. That's why I'm trying to get to the point where I'm waking up at 4 and out with the bottle at 4:30. Because if I separate them at 4:30, I can feed as early as 7:30. Of course, there'll still be about an hour gap between the bucks and when we feed the does. But it would just get the does finished with breakfast earlier. I like trying to have morning and evening feeding as close to 12 hours apart as I can. It never quite hits exactly 12 hours apart in the current system.